The room was dead silent. Every pair of eyes was on Marcus as he sat on the wooden bench in front of the old piano. The keys were dusty, a few chipped at the edges, and the lid creaked when he lifted it. The teacher, Mr. Carter, stood a few feet away, his arms crossed and a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "This should be good," Carter said loudly, making sure the entire class could hear. "Show us what you've got, Marcus. Since you say you like music, let's see if you can actually play something. Or are you just wasting our time?" The class chuckled nervously. Marcus didn't look at anyone. His hands rested over the keys, trembling slightly. He hadn't asked to do this, he hadn't volunteered. Carter had singled him out, again, like he always did. It was supposed to be a joke, another way to put Marcus on the spot in front of everyone. The clock ticked. Marcus could feel his heartbeat pounding in his chest. He remembered the times he had come early to the community center, sneaking into the back room where another piano sat. Hours of practice, fingers fumbling at first, then slowly learning the patterns, the rhythm, the flow. He had never told anyone about it. Not even his father, and now here he was being forced to play, not out of choice but as a setup for humiliation. Carter tapped his foot impatiently. "Come on, boy. Don't just sit there. Play something. Entertain us." A few boys in the back laughed. Marcus closed his eyes. His fingers hovered for a second longer, then pressed down. The first notes echoed, sharp and clear, cutting through the silence like a blade. The laughter stopped. The room shifted. Within seconds, the mocking stares turned into something else. Something Carter hadn't planned for. Because the sound coming from that piano was not the sound of a boy being mocked. It was the sound of a boy speaking without words. And Carter, for the first time, had nothing to say. Marcus's mornings always started the same way. The alarm clock buzzed at 6:15 sharp, its dull ringing echoing through the small bedroom he shared with his younger cousin Tyler. The apartment was modest. 2 bedrooms, peeling paint in some corners, the faint smell of cooking oil lingering from the night before. But it was home. His father James worked long shifts as a security guard, and mornings were usually quiet. By the time Marcus woke up, James was already gone, his uniform pressed and boots polished, leaving only a mug of half-finished coffee on the kitchen table. Marcus would grab a bowl of cereal, slip on his sneakers, and head out for the 15-minute walk to school. The streets were ordinary, lined with cracked sidewalks and small stores that were just beginning to open. Old men sat on stoops, sipping coffee and talking about the latest neighborhood news. Delivery trucks rumbled past, brakes screeching as they stopped at corner shops. It was the kind of everyday background noise that blended into routine, the kind of life you stopped noticing after a while. At school, Marcus kept to himself. He wasn't the loudest kid, nor was he the quietest. He sat in the middle row of most classrooms, never seeking the spotlight, but never hiding either. His friends, if they could be called that, were a small group of boys he sometimes hung out with during lunch. They weren't particularly close. They just happened to sit at the same table, swapping jokes and talking about basketball. But the thing that set Marcus apart, though almost no one knew it, was his secret: the piano. It started a year earlier, when Marcus stumbled into the community center one evening. The basketball court was full, and instead of waiting, he wandered through the halls until he found a small room with a battered upright piano in the corner. The lid was half broken, and several keys stuck when pressed, but something about it pulled him in. He sat down and pressed a few notes. At first the sound was clumsy, uneven, almost silly, but he returned the next day, and the day after that. Before long, it became a habit. He would sneak into the room whenever he could, teaching himself with online videos and borrowed library books. He made mistakes, plenty of them, but slowly his hands learned to move faster, smoother, more confidently. The piano became his refuge, the place where the weight of school and the sharp edges of Mr. Carter's remarks couldn't reach him. Mr. Carter was another routine in Marcus's life, though not one he enjoyed. The man had a way of looking at Marcus that made his stomach knot. Sometimes it was a comment about his attitude, other times it was a snide remark about how people like you don't really care about education. Marcus never argued back. He just swallowed it, like a bitter pill. The days blurred together. Math tests, cafeteria lunches, basketball games after school, evenings spent helping Tyler with homework, and nights when Marcus would quietly hum melodies to himself before falling asleep. On the surface, everything seemed normal. Just a boy going to school trying to stay out of trouble. But under the surface, tension brewed. Carter's words had been growing sharper, his spotlight on Marcus more deliberate. It wasn't every day, but it was enough that Marcus noticed. Enough that he dreaded certain classes. And yet Marcus never told his father. James was already carrying enough on his shoulders, working long hours to keep food on the table. Marcus didn't want to add more weight, so he carried it alone. Day after day, routine after routine. Until the morning came when Carter decided to break that routine, and everything Marcus had been holding inside would finally come to the surface. It was a Wednesday morning when things started to shift. The day had the same dull rhythm at first. The long walk to school, the chatter of students crowding the entrance, the usual announcements over the crackling intercom. Marcus slid into his seat in third-period music class, head down, notebook open. Mr. Carter walked in as he always did, carrying himself like he owned the air in the room. He clapped his hands twice loudly to grab attention. "All right, gentlemen, listen up. Today we're going to do something a little different. I want to see what kind of talent this class actually has." A few boys exchanged glances, curious. The music room was cramped, posters of old composers tacked unevenly to the walls, an upright piano shoved into the corner. No one really paid much attention to it until Carter gestured toward it with a grin. "Who here thinks they can play?" he asked, his eyes sweeping the room. A couple of boys shrugged, some laughed. No one raised a hand. Then Carter's gaze locked on Marcus. "You, Marcus, why don't you show us something?" Marcus froze. His pencil rolled off his desk and clattered onto the floor, but he didn't reach for it. Oh, don't tell me you don't know anything." Carter cut him off, his voice sharp. "You've got that look like you think you're special. Let's see it." A ripple of laughter spread across the room. Marcus's stomach sank. He hadn't told anyone about the piano. He never wanted to. But Carter wasn't asking. He was ordering. "I don't play," Marcus said quietly. Carter raised his eyebrows. "Don't play? You expect me to believe that? You've got rhythm in your blood, don't you? Come on now. Show us a little something." The room went still, for a second. Everyone knew what Carter meant. The smirk on his face gave it away. Marcus felt heat crawl up his neck. "I said I don't," Marcus repeated, firmer this time. Carter's smile vanished. He leaned forward on Marcus's desk, close enough that Marcus could smell the stale coffee on his breath. "Get up," he said. Not loudly, but in a way that left no room for refusal. Marcus's legs moved before his brain caught up. He stood, every step toward the piano feeling like he was walking into a trap. He could feel the stairs drilling into his back. When he reached the bench, Carter clapped his hands together mockingly. "Good. Sit. Play us something. Anything. We're waiting." The boys in the back chuckled. Someone muttered, "This is gonna be funny." Marcus lowered himself onto the bench, staring at the keys. His hands rested in his lap. He could have sat there all day, silent, refusing, but Carter would never let that slide. He'd twist it, drag it out, use it against him for weeks. So Marcus made a choice. If he was going to be forced into this, then he wouldn't let Carter decide how the story ended. He placed his hands on the keys. The weight of the room pressed in on him. The whispers, the snickers, Carter's smug grin. His fingers trembled. But then memory took over. The hours in the community center, the patterns etched into muscle memory, the melodies he played when no one was listening. The first notes rang out, hesitant at first. Carter chuckled. "See? Just noise." But then Marcus's hands moved faster. His left hand carried the rhythm, deep and steady, while his right danced across the higher notes, weaving a melody that filled the room. The sound was fuller, richer than anyone expected from the dusty old piano. The laughter stopped. Heads turned. Even the boys in the back, ready to make jokes, sat straighter in their chairs. Carter's grin faltered. Marcus didn't look up. He just kept playing, letting the music build, layering sound over sound, his body swaying slightly with the rhythm. The tension that had knotted his chest all morning loosened with every chord. For the first time, he wasn't thinking about Carter. He wasn't thinking about being mocked, he was just playing. By the time his fingers slowed, the room was silent again. But not the kind of silence Carter wanted. This wasn't the silence of a boy humiliated. This was the silence of a class stunned, unsure how to react. Marcus lifted his hands from the keys and rested them in his lap. He didn't look at anyone. Carter cleared his throat. He tried to speak, but the words caught. Finally, he muttered, "Sit down." Marcus rose, walked back to his desk, and sat. The eyes of the class followed him, not with mockery anymore, but with something else. Respect, maybe. Or shock. Carter turned his back to the room, pretending to shuffle papers on his desk. His shoulders were stiff, his jaw tight. For once, he had no smart remark. And that silence was louder than anything Marcus had ever heard in that classroom. For the rest of that class, Carter said almost nothing. He assigned a reading, scribbled something half-heartedly on the whiteboard, and kept his back turned longer than usual. Marcus sat quietly, pretending to take notes, but still hearing the echo of the piano in his head. He didn't know whether to feel relieved or nervous. When the bell rang, the students filed out, whispering to each other. A few glanced at Marcus, some even nodding slightly as if to say that was impressive. But Marcus kept his head down. He knew how things worked. Respect from classmates didn't erase the way Carter looked at him. And sure enough, the storm came. By the next morning, Carter had shifted his tone completely. During roll call, he called Marcus's name and said, "Our little pianist, why don't you treat us again?" His voice dripped with sarcasm. Marcus shook his head. "No, sir." Carter chuckled. "No? Suddenly shy? Yesterday you were Beethoven himself. What's the matter? Ran out of tricks?" The class laughed uneasily. Marcus clenched his jaw. He didn't rise to it. But Carter didn't stop. Over the next week, he found ways to needle Marcus. "Hey, maestro, why don't you play something on the desk with your pencils? Or, maybe you should stick to the piano since math doesn't seem to be your thing." It wasn't always direct. Sometimes it was the way he said boy instead. Of Marcus, the way his eyes lingered longer when Marcus answered a question, the way he rolled his tongue on certain words just to remind him of the difference he saw. The pressure built until one Friday afternoon when Carter pushed too far. The class had just finished a short quiz and Carter was passing back the graded sheets. He slapped Marcus's paper down harder than necessary and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Maybe if you put as much effort into studying as you do into showing off, you wouldn't be barely passing." Marcus stared at the paper. A 72, circled in red. Not great, but not failing either. He felt his chest burn. He looked up, and for once he didn't drop his gaze. "I'm not showing off," Marcus said, his voice steady. The room froze. Students glanced back and forth like they were watching a fight about to break out. Carter tilted his head, narrowing his eyes. "What did you say?" "I didn't ask to play," Marcus repeated. "You made me, that wasn't me showing off." The silence was suffocating. No one breathed. Carter's lips curled into a tight smile. "Watch your tone, boy." Something snapped inside Marcus. Weeks, months, of comments, digs, and stares all stacked together until the weight was unbearable. "My name is Marcus," he said, louder this time. The words hit the room like a strike of thunder. A couple of boys muttered, "Yo," under their breath, stunned that Marcus dared to push back. Carter's face darkened. Detention. Today. After school. Marcus's fists clenched under his desk. He wanted to argue, to shout, to demand why. But he knew better. Detention was a punishment, but if he kept pushing, it could become suspension, or worse. And James didn't need a call from the school on top of everything else. So Marcus bit down on the inside of his cheek and said nothing. That afternoon, he sat alone in the detention room. Carter didn't show up. Another teacher supervised, but the silence weighed heavier than the punishment. Marcus kept replaying the scene in his head, his chest still burning with anger. When he got home, James noticed. His father always noticed. "What's wrong?" he asked as Marcus pushed his food around on the plate. "Nothing," Marcus muttered. James gave him a long look, but didn't press. He'd raised Marcus long enough to know his son spoke when he was ready. The weekend gave Marcus space to breathe, but Monday brought it all back. Carter was waiting, sharper than ever. During a group discussion, he interrupted Marcus mid-sentence with, "Maybe stick to music, Marcus. Leave the thinking to the others." Laughter. Not everyone, but enough. This time, Marcus's ears rang. His hands shook. He wanted to walk out, slam the door, never come back. Instead, he sat still, burning inside. But the moment that changed everything came 2 days later. Carter announced a talent showcase for the class. Each student had to present something, a song, a poem, anything creative. "Let's see what kind of hidden geniuses we have," he said, smiling right at Marcus. Marcus knew immediately this wasn't about the class. It was about him. Carter wanted another chance to control the narrative, to put him on stage as the butt of the joke. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling, listening to Tyler snore softly across the room. His mind spun. Part of him wanted to refuse to stay silent no matter what. But another part, the same part that had made him touch those piano keys the first time, told him he couldn't. If he stayed silent, Carter would win. If he played again, on his own terms, it wouldn't just be music, it would be resistance. By the morning of the showcase, Marcus had made his decision. When his turn came, he stood, walked to the piano, and sat. His heart raced, but his hands didn't shake. He glanced around the room. The boys were waiting, smirks on some faces, curiosity on others. Carter leaned back against the wall, arms folded, smug. Marcus placed his fingers on the keys, and then he played. Not the simple melodies he'd practiced in secret before. This time he played with force, with clarity, with emotion that filled every corner of the room. Notes crashed like waves, rose like shouts, fell like whispers. The piano spoke for him, louder than words ever could. The class sat frozen. No laughter, no whispers, just silence and sound. When the last chord rang out, Marcus lifted his hands and looked straight at Carter. And for the first time, he saw something flicker in Carter's eyes, something that looked like fear. The classroom stayed silent after Marcus finished his piece. His hands hovered above the keys for a moment before he let them fall into his lap. The echoes of the final chord still seemed to hang in the air. Nobody laughed this time. Nobody whispered. The boys in the back, the ones always quick to snicker, just stared. A couple even muttered under their breath. Man, that was crazy. Mr. Carter cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably against the wall. All right, he said stiffly. That's enough. Sit down. Marcus stood, keeping his head high. He walked back to his desk slowly, not rushing, not hiding. For once he didn't feel small under Carter's gaze. He felt tall, taller than he'd ever felt in that room. The rest of the showcase went on, but the energy was different. The boys who followed fumbled through jokes and half-hearted attempts at songs, but no one forgot what they'd just heard. Marcus had taken the moment meant to humiliate him and turned it into something unforgettable.